to a new episode of What You Doing Podcast, the interview podcast where I talk to cool people about the amazing stuff they're working on. My name is Matt. Today I'm sitting down to talk with Josh Domanski about his work on Liminal Horror Deluxe Edition, hopefully still live on BackerKit as you're hearing this. Liminal Horror is a, you might have guessed, horror TTRPG that draws on OSR rule guidelines to tell a story about investigators that are underpowered and forever changed by the creatures they come into contact with. I was very excited to connect with Goblin Archives on Blue Sky about this. We sat down and I ended up talking with Josh. I'm hoping to talk to Goblin Archives about liminal horror in the future. If you're excited about that, let me know, and we will try to do that sooner rather than later. That's enough out of me. I'll talk to you more in the outro. An editor's note before we jump into it: Josh did have some audio issues that do resolve. He had a problem with his mic. And there are some bits where the audio freezes a little bit. That was a thing in the recording. And sadly, there's really not much I can do about it. I cleaned it up as much as I could. I do have backup audio and I used what I could. But just be aware there are some points where we have some small audio weirdness. Oh, perfect shirt choice. I had to change my shirt because it was raining. And I was like, would I be a nerd if I put my Control shirt on?
That would have been really funny.
Everybody that loves Control also loves Quantum Break, right?
Except if you're a PlayStation player. Quantum Break is the one that I haven't gotten around to because I didn't have a computer that could play it until like just recently. And it never came to PlayStation, so I was like, oh,
yeah, that's fair.
Would love to play this.
That's fair. It's the one that a lot of people never talk about, even if they have the ability to play it, whatever. I'm like, don't overlook it. It's a nice, easy intro. Watch. All I have to do is say, hey everybody, welcome to What You Doing Podcast. I'm Matt. Today I'm hanging out with Josh, talking about Liminal Horror Deluxe Edition. That's hard to say. Josh, say hello.
Hello.
I was really excited. The amazing, the incomparable Jack pinged me in a thread on Blue Sky to talk about Liminal Horror, and I was very excited. I've been a fan of Liminal Horror for a little bit. It's a game that like kicks around in my brain every so often where I'm like, and you just get thinking about stuff for a minute. And I'm so excited to sit down and chat with you about the deluxe edition. It's such a neat idea. It's a thing that's come up a couple times talking about TTRPGs, this idea of like releasing something in a, I don't want to say bare bones, but like simple
beta.
Yeah, like direct way that's like, here it is. Here's the text, here's the rules. Boom, go. And then have the ability to come back later and say, all right, we got new art. We're doing new editing, all of this. It's exciting. It's very cool to see because, you know, you can still have it both ways. You know, the old version still exists, and then you can still get a nice, fancy, full art, fancy pants edition. So leading us off, Josh, listen, I'm getting ahead of myself. I get all excited, you know, where I'm like, yeah, let's do the podcast. This is fun. And I get ahead of myself. Josh, go ahead and introduce yourself for the audience. Let everybody know who you are, what you do, other things they might know you from, anything like that.
Sure. So I'm Josh Domanski. I let's see my many hats. I'm writing in the tabletop scene. I do a little bit of design work here. You know, most of the more recent sort of design stuff from the Liminal Horror is coming out of me. I do a little bit of development editing on the side. I find that kind of fun, but I got a couple of random projects I'll work on occasion for that. And then I am an occasional actual play host, if you want to consider that. So,
I mean, listen, it's a thing. What's the most recent one, or the one you would point somebody to?
For the sake of this conversation, I ran a campaign of the Bureau for Gehenna Gaming over on their YouTube channel. Yeah. Man, I feel like that was a couple years ago at this point. But that's a full run of the module. I think we did like 7 episodes of it. I thought it was pretty good. We had some, you know, sort of both technical and staffing difficulties that we had to work around, but it ultimately, you know, the cast was great. Their production value was pretty good too. So I was really excited about how that all kind of came together and turned out. So that's a good one to go figure out. I had a real shit microphone, but at least it's there. But more recently, I don't know if it's permanent because they'll occasionally switch people in, but over on the Weekly Scroll, they have a series that's called Side Quests that revolves entirely around my schedule, so it is very inconsistent with when episodes release. But Side Quests are so the Weekly Scroll does pretty much weekly reviews of games. And the Side Quest series is supposed to be, running those games that they have reviewed for the sake of example, but with a little bit more of a gear towards, like, we're talking about the mechanics and the game and the system, in the sense that if this was someone's first introduction to this game, hey, go watch this actual play. And go from there. I think we ended up getting like 7 episodes or something like that, but we really had to stop while we were working on the deluxe edition for Liminal Horror because it's consumed every facet of my life. So.
I like the idea of like sorry, we can't do the show about games because I have to make it. I have to make the game. So hang on, we'll come back to it.
But beyond the actual play stuff, you can find the rest of my work in a couple of random places. I did 2 of these level 0 funnels for Old School Essentials with the Afterthought Committee. That was sort of the first stuff I was working on when zines had come out. I more recently did a bit of design work on the Outer Rim Uprising Mothership collection. That's a third-party collection from the Lost Bay, where it's not out yet because there's a production schedule that has been pretty delayed based on the manufacturer. But I did the layout on, was it They Won't Cage Us, I think is the name of the scenario there. And then I was the principal writer on the campaign handbook for the box set, which is like this. I think it ended up being 60 pages in the zine, but it's the one zine that binds the entire box set together. What else? I think that's the big stuff. Oh, and in the future, I don't know when people will listen to this episode, but there should be a Mothership adventure called Till Death Do Us Part that's being published by Silver Arm that may or may not be out. It's not out as we record this, but it is close to being finished.
I've never had more of an idea, more of a vision of the amount of things moving in the TTRPG space at any one time as I have in the last 8 to 9 months since doing this podcast and following more creative people on TTRPG. There is just an infinite number of things that are being written, being edited, being shipped, being completed, being manufactured. It is almost overwhelming the amount of stuff. I can definitely understand why, I feel like it happens in video games too, and it's only gotten worse the last couple of years. Where, you'll be like, how did you not hear about this really cool thing that this person made? It's like, because there are 900 other things coming out every single day.
I always feel like I'm pretty plugged into most of the tabletop RPG stuff, kind of in general, and then all of a sudden, again, you'll see some really popular thing pop up, or some conversation, or somebody doing a review of a thing that I have absolutely no context to, and I'm like, okay.
You're like, how did this miss me completely?
Yeah.
That's just how it goes. But all right, Liminal Horror Deluxe. Let's talk about Liminal Horror in general, and then we'll get talk to the whys and the hows. So Liminal Horror, how would you describe this system of Liminal Horror? I would think of it as like a cairn, but I don't know if there's a term for. I don't know if we've come up with a fancy term for that yet.
So Liminal Horror, the original version released in 2021. It was written by Goblin Archives, my current writing partner, and that was a little zine, 40-ish pages, what have you. That was around for about 6 months before I kind of formally joined the team to help work on the Bureau, which came out a little while after that. But the first iteration of the system, and it's pretty much exactly the same. There's only been very minor changes as we've gone forward, but it was very much a Cairn hack. For at that time, it was specified for sort of like this cosmic horror sort of take there, with the idea being you're running contemporary cosmic horror to kind of set it apart from the Call of Cthulhu's of the world, or the type of game there. When I got in, in early 2022, the big thing was I was like, this is a survival horror RPG, where it is Cairn. The basic mechanics from Cairn are there, but things have been kind of tweaked just a little bit to focus it more definitively on the horror element. Cairn itself comes from Electric Bastion Land, and Electric Bastion Land is the iteration of Into the Odd, blah, blah, blah. So there's all this lineage that kind of goes into it there. But so we took the bones of Cairn and brought forward. Goblin Archives ended up adding the Fallout system, which kind of defines Liminal Horror itself, where Fallout is a representation of the horrors having a tangible effect on your characters. So you can get into fights, you can, save the day against these monsters, but you're probably not going to be the same person in both an emotional and a very real physical sense by the time that your character is sort of done with their part of the story. So Fallout was this big draw, the first portion of the system. When we went back and in the process of developing the deluxe edition, because we've been at this for 2 years now, a little bit longer than that, we ended up putting together what we're calling the Investigator Edition, which is a little basically a stopgap scene. But we were migrating over from Exalted Funeral to Space Penguin, who currently publishes the Liminal Horror line, and use that as an opportunity to kind of start kicking gears on reprinting and reworking some of the stuff that had been done in that first year and a half. So the Investigator Edition is just taking that original zine and updating it to be current with the work that we had done at the time for the Deluxe Edition. So the basic mechanics completely the same. Everything is completely compatible. It's still got your Fallout, still got your stats and all that stuff. But the one sort of major difference for the Investigator Edition was this wounds system that was added in there, where it's really heading off on the horror tropes where characters lose a limb. If you think of Ash in The Evil Dead, how he eventually straps the chainsaw to it. So we wanted to kind of drill in and get that angle of it as well. So wounds work a lot like Fallout, except instead of monsters corrupting you, it's very physical things happening to your character. So you've got your base health and HP. You've got your very you is at risk with Fallout, and then we have this new at the time wound system there that is your physical body being threatened.
It's got to feel weird talking about this in the way that it's like you said, new. It's we wrote this 2 years ago, and it's
it's nuts because it's except we've been working on it for so long, and the Investigator Edition of the game, this 40 pages or whatever is the start of our hardcover. We did go back and retweak it a little bit, just things that we weren't exactly happy with and whatnot. But it's always funny because it's that was the first thing we wrote for the Deluxe Edition, and then you go back and it's a year and a half later, and it's I do not remember writing any of this. It's we were cooking here, damn.
I love that's and I think that's such an interesting I mentioned it's a thing that's come up a couple times. I think it's such an interesting thing to create a work and sort of put it away, and and it exists on its own, and then have the ability to revisit it and say oh wow, there are things in here that even I'd forgotten, or wow, there was some even in both ways that I'm sure when you revisit something like that you're ooh, this is a little rough, this isn't how I would do this now, or I've learned to do this better, or oh wow, I was really inspired. I don't know if I would have come to this the same way. I think it's such a fun idea.
We originally we've had 16 different release dates for the Deluxe Edition in mind before we finally settled on, we launched already the campaign as the time of this recording, but the book will follow imminently. But we were working on it with the expectation that it would be out as early as a year ago at this point. And then we were constantly pushing it back. It was going to be a 250-page book at that point. I think we're getting closer to 400 now, but I don't know where it's going to net out in the end because we still got some layout to do. But we'd gotten into it, and the idea comes up that we're going to make this new adventure as a little bit of stopgap because we knew we were going to need a lot more time on the deluxe edition at that point. And we were going to do a rework of Against the Call of the Reptile God, update it for modern horror, basically rip everything out, but it's like core idea, and do a little 40-page zine of that. Mm-hmm. And so we start work on it, and that first 40 pages comes pretty quick. It's almost done. And we get word from our publisher, and he's like, "Hey, the distributor wants hardcovers." And we're like, "Okay, I guess we're going to take this little scene and make a hardcover out of it." And so what ends up happening is we create, the Parthenogenesis of Hungry Hollow. It's 120 pages or whatever, so we blew that out. But it's like 6 months in the middle of trying to write, what's ultimately like a 400-page book. We just like lost to creating what I think is a pretty good module. So I'm not like it's disappointed, but in terms of like the timing, we had this like very intentional, like we were working on both at the start where I was doing, I think I was writing what became the facilitator guide for the deluxe edition when Goblin Archives was doing the first draft of what became Hungry Hollow. And we got to the point where it's like, we hear the word that we need to expand it. We need 100 pages to make it worth it for a hardcover. And so we both were kind of just like, shit, we got to do this. So we dropped the deluxe edition for, like I said, it was about 6 months, and just, put all of our focus into getting the module together. So we weren't done by any means in the deluxe edition. So coming back to it, it's like all these half-written ideas and stuff that I not fleshed out and stuff.
Put scary thing here. Well,
yeah, basically. Yeah.
Scary monster guy. Okay, there's a scary monster guy. Here we go.
Yeah, more or less. That's how you write,
I have heard that before. That a lot of the advice that people will say a lot is, if you're writing and you hit a spot and you're just like, I can't think of something, just jot some ideas and keep moving and keep that momentum. And
yeah, it's the it's the worst. Where your brain just doesn't work. Like, I'm no longer generating prose in my head. So you stare at the page for like an hour without doing anything. But yeah, just getting anything out is better than nothing. You can always come back and tweak and fix and whatnot. But staring at the blank page does not feel good and doesn't help. So get your garbage on the page first.
How frequently is it that in your experience that you're working on multiple projects at a time?
I'm literally not working on multiple things at the same time. Well, I don't know. I got like undiagnosed attention deficit disorder. It's been a problem my entire life, but I don't really feel like doing anything to change it. So it's one of the things where every project that I work on, I'm gonna hate at some point. Like the work is not done until I can't stand to look at it.
I get that.
That's when it's ready to release. So what I like to do for my own, personal workload is to creatively juggle, where there's always one primary thing that's getting worked on at any given time. But because I get bored of it pretty quickly, having something else going in the background is really useful for keeping momentum. Because if I stop, I stop. Like, I've, this week is a really good example because I've barely gotten anything done for the past week because I hit, the burnout wall. And because everything I was working on kind of stalled all at once, it's really hard to kind of get back going. So I find it useful to, keep an open document and just like jotting down notes, doing little things. I've got like half a dozen things that I'm probably never going to produce, but the act of creation at least getting the ideas about is, a joyful act. So it's very useful. But that's also how I end up doing, working on Mothership stuff at the same time as Liminal Horror, when I probably should prioritize one or the other, and blah blah blah. Makes my schedule very full.
Yeah, it feels like every TTRPG designer I've talked to feels like they have the thing that's almost done and they have to get out the door, and then the thing that's like moderately done and they're like their active project, and then the thing that's like a little bit done and it's the thing they're going to work on next, and then some number of things that are some percentage of done / bare ideas / a thing written down in the notes app in a feverish dream.
Yeah.
I mean, but I think that's just the creative pursuit. I think,
Yeah.
it's just how creation goes. And I have diagnosed ADHD from when I was a child that, hey, I probably still have, let's be honest with ourselves. And I definitely get that feeling of like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I have to, I can't, I had that, hey, a little vulnerability peek behind the curtain here. I had that last week where I was like, oh, I got to do some stuff for the podcast. And I was just like, no, I cannot. And then I had to do an interview. And sometimes people's schedules are what they are. And it's like, all right, well, I got to get my shit together because it's time to do the thing. I either keep doing the thing or I stop. And that's when you decide how it works. So, Deluxe Edition, did you, I mean, y'all, it's not just you, it's the two of you at the very least. Did you go into creating the original version of Liminal Horror with the idea that you would eventually expand? Was it, hey, let's do this thing, and you come back to it and you're like, hey, what would be really fun is if we took another stab at this, expanded this? Was it a feeling of necessity, like you needed more content to do what you wanted to do in the future?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure what the original intention from Goblin Archives was. A lot of the times when you work on stuff, systems, adventures, and whatnot, you don't really know who's going to respond to it, who's going to pick it up, who's going to like it. So Liminal Horror had already taken off before I had joined on the official team. But by the time I had gotten in 2022, the idea was already present, so whether or not he had decided first thing or later down the line, it was always something that, as far as we as writing partners together had kind of wanted to pursue. Because the original idea was to do a box set. I don't think that this was because of Mothership, but Mothership certainly helped that idea kind of propagate a little while longer.
That's fair.
And we had already done, we got right into the zines as soon as I was hopping on. Goblin Archives was working on The Mall at the time when I pitched the Bureau. And then, he had done The Mall while I was working on Tangled for Old School Essentials. And then we kind of quickly came together and did the Bureau together. And those both released at like exactly the same time. So it's like right off the bat, we had these two modules in zine form ready to go. So the idea of a nice little box set to kind of like contain it all together was kind of alluring. I think that pretty quickly went away once we started getting into like the scope of what we wanted to do. Because the thing is like we never wanted to do a second edition. It's maybe that's something that comes down the line. I don't know. I don't think it's necessary, especially once the deluxe edition is going to come out. But there is more that you can provide than a zine can contain. For, if you get a standard mix and print from a zine, you're looking at about 40 pages before the thing starts to bow and hold itself open. And you can get away with about a maximum of like 60-ish pages. Liminal Horror is great in terms of how compact it can fit. We can do the entire set of rules and even like character creation on like 2 pages if we really want to get down to it. But like that doesn't really support the players. That doesn't support the GM in any capacity. So while we can provide a little bit of that in a zine, we can do a lot more of that in a hardcover. So we've been kicking around that hardcover idea for a while. In particular, we're working with Space Penguin on this one. Like I said, at the start here, they're the publisher of Liminal Horror at the moment. Space Penguin is run by Jarrett Crater, who is involved with both the Mothership and the Cairn box sets. So we get firsthand knowledge about how awful it is to make a box set.
I like that idea of just like we want to make a box set. No, you don't. Yeah. No.
So, oh shit, where did I put it? So I just got this in the mail. This is not quite a box set, but do you know Soul Muppet Publishing?
Yeah.
They do Orbital Blues, Best Left Buried. Yeah. So they just did they're starting to fulfill their Kickstarter campaign for Afterburn, which is the most recent Orbital Blues expansion. And they put out this box called Rogue Anthems that is a bunch of like hand-foot adventures in a VHS case.
Oh, hell yeah.
Coolest fucking thing I've ever seen. I jokingly asked the publisher about if we could do something similar for Liminal Horror in the future, and it was like, no.
I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I'm not going to. No.
Yeah, there was no way. The thing is like, it's an odd printing size. It's to put the pamphlets in there. Getting the VHS cases it's not impossible, but it's like,
right.
Good luck. Like, I know what Soul Muppet had to go through to get that to work, and it's like, that's love of the game right there. But that's like, I think Space Penguin's like two people. They're not doing that. I talked about the Mothership box set at the start of this little side conversation, and that's in my hands. That has fulfilled. I was a backer, so I got the PDFs and stuff early. And one of the things that Mothership has had to deal with from the start is, even with the original Zero Edition zine, there was this expectation that you already understood that Mothership was coming from an OSR like culture of play. So there are parts of the game that don't really explain themselves because they expect the audience is coming in with sort of that knowledge. You know how to run games already, so you can pick this up and run it. When they expanded to the box set, they did a really good job of including additional elements to help people along. Like the Warden Operation Manual is one of the best books you can buy in tabletop RPGs all in of itself. And I really respect the choice to stay with the zines. You have that little box set there. It's cool. It fits in the aesthetic. It's it's technically easy to produce compared to like a box or like a hardcover, because you can get zines at pretty much anywhere, depending on where you want to print. But the problem that Mothership still runs into is that it is constrained by its space, where they have, I think the 4 base scenes in the box set there are still a couple of pretty big, like, glaring holes for somebody coming to horror for the first time and trying to run it. So when we made the definitive choice, we're going to do this as a hardcover. It was around the time that we did Hungry Hollow, so it was about, I don't know, a year or so ago at this point, maybe a little longer than that. But we did not want to feel like we were limited by the format. So we go to a hardcover. We can write as much as we want within limit. And then that will be bound in one thing that you can take. We're not doing the stupid 3-book spread. It's all one, tome. It's got your player stuff. It's got your GM stuff. It's got a whole bunch of like tools and tricks and whatnot. Just like, let's get this to the table. We're not going to dick people around or anything like that. It's going to be one book. It's going to be compatible with everything that's already been released. We're not going to change the system in that regard or anything like that. But yeah, just get it all down, get it in a book, and get it out to people.
Now what? You don't want to put out like the player rules, in like February. And then you could put out like actual monsters in like August. And then maybe by December, you can be like, here's like how to run the game. That's an absolutely sustainable business model. I can't believe everyone doesn't do it. It's obviously just take a whole year to release your product over 3 different SKUs. It's a great idea.
Yeah. We're small enough on the indie side of things to have to worry about destroying our reputation to begin with. But, again, it's one of those things where that's really just milking it. We're not in this for the money.
It's not like if I was in this for the money, I wouldn't be writing for tabletop RPGs, in this capacity.
If you wanted to make money, you would do a different thing. You would.
Yeah. So it's really just about getting what we think is the best thing that we can do, like our artistic intention, having that out for people to use and enjoy and play. And again, like we want the Investigator Edition to still be used too. Like everybody bought this. You can have your Legacy zine, your first edition of Liminal Horror. That's still going to be useful. Where we're saying that like we're keeping this in print too. Like this is going to be around. But the hardcover book is like the thing that GM buys and like they keep at home and they're, referencing, they're using it to build out their sessions and learn how to run the system and play the game and all that stuff. And then when you get to the table, it's like your players only need this little book. The book itself has got like character sheets in the back and stuff too. So they like literally only need this and a set of dice and maybe a pen. But so you don't have to bring that giant tome with you unless you really want it at the table. So it's going to ease of play. And it doesn't make anything you bought worthless,
There is something, I joke about releasing your game over like a year, whatever. There is something really fun about having a big pile of books that it's like, okay, hang on, because listen, we all want to be wizards. Even if we're playing horror space games, we all want to be like, okay, hang on, I have to consult. That's fun. That's fun.
So there's definitely like a right and a wrong way to do it. I think we got a right way going on here, but like we have the zine, like I said, that we're going to keep this in print. We have the Liminal Horror RPG website where you can find the rules for free. It's all the base rules of the game that we've been keeping updated on that website there. And then, like the base PDF of Liminal Horror Investigators Edition is free as well. So you've got a lot of these different ways to get in there and be accessible without having to, worry about printing and shipping.
It hasn't come up yet. I feel I don't know if there's any space to be like, yeah, so what what's going on with tariffs, because it's like it's bad. What do it's like when I was chatting with Ryan Lynch and I was like I don't know how to talk about AI, but I feel like we should talk about AI. And it's like, but what's the discussion other than like, yeah, sucks, dog. Like, sucks for everybody. There's no, you know what I mean? Like,
this is one instance where I really like working with the publisher because, in a selfish way, it's not my problem. But
yeah, true.
Realistically, it is my problem because we have to kind of factor these things in. So tariffs are, the problem is that they're such an unknown.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you can deal with a tariff. You can work around that. You can set your project budgets. You can set, you can find other ways to get around it, which is kind of the intention of the tariff anyway, is that they want you to print domestic. But if it was consistent, if it was one thing we could guarantee it was going to be this one thing,
mm-hmm.
that'd be great. Not great, it's not ideal, but that's
right.
That's fine. We can work with that. The fact that we don't know what the fuck is going to happen is the problem. Because we aren't ready for print yet. We're going to be probably 2 months out for print because we've got a little bit of the layout done. The text is, the manuscript is complete. It's edited. It's sitting there waiting for us. We're just working on a couple of like the stretch goals and stuff right now before we really push into layout. Beyond the stuff that we've already kind of done with that already. So we're still a little ways out, but we just don't know what it looks like. But we're gonna have to cross that bridge when we come to it. Again, we don't want to pass that on to the customer. Like that's not the ideal. But I don't know what's really gonna happen there. We're gonna use the same printer that we've used for Hungry Hollow. It's this manufacturer that's out of China. It wasn't ideal in terms of how we were approaching it back then when we started printing Hungry Hollow. I wanted to do domestic where possible, but it's not that it wasn't feasible. It's just that it wasn't going to work great for us. Where we had a couple of options for, I think one was in the US and one was in Canada. One of the manufacturers that we wanted to go with just never got back to us, so we couldn't even like get quotes or prints or anything like that from them. The one that did respond to us, we could have printed and made money on the book in terms of like how much it cost per unit. but I just really did not like the quality of their print.
Mm.
There were a couple of things that like drove me nuts about like how the book was bound and like where the pages sat and stuff like that. Like little annoying things that only like a pedant would really be worried about.
Mm-hmm.
But then when we get this manufacturer out of China, where it saved us a little bit of money, we can get this sewn bound book that it's not lay flat by any means, but you're not getting like huge chunks of the page lost in the gutters because of the way that the sewn binding opens.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can recapture a little bit more of the page. We can kind of center the layout instead of having to do that thing because I don't know how an offset layout looks in print or in PDF form when you're flipping through pages. So I prefer to be able to do the centered one. And the manufacturer was like super nice. The person who we were coordinating with was getting back to us, in like minutes, even though they were overseas. But the whole thing was like the experience ended up working out really nicely for us. So right now the plan is to use them again. We'll see what happens in 2 months, but it was such an ideal in terms of they gave us exactly the spec that we wanted. We can get anything we want. We're going to do a cloth bound for the deluxe edition for like a little extra special version. They can do that, no problem. And it is a price where I think we can weather some of the tariffs without having to worry about it. But it's also confusing because there is word that we're hearing that books are not covered under the tariffs. So we wouldn't have to pay for that. But gaming material is for sure. So we've been able to work with the assumption that a tabletop RPG book is a book and not a game, but it really depends on how the enforcement agencies want to come after us, basically, when we start trying to get the stuff shipped in. But we've already made this was even before the tariffs. So we'd made the very intentional choice where we're doing printed media. That's it. So we were trying to keep shipping costs down by using media mail, especially for like domestic stuff in the US, where media mail started to a little bit heavier on the enforcement a few months back, where you can't ship a package with media mail if you have like pamphlets or a patch or any like little tchotchkes in that, even if the primary thing is the book. Space Penguin started getting hit with the extra fees or whatever that they had to eat when the enforcement agencies came and was like, hey, this has to be only media. So we're like, all right, for the deluxe edition, we're doing nothing. We're doing a couple of extra zines. We're doing the book itself, no pamphlets, no patches, no merch, no anything like that, just so we can keep the shipping costs from skyrocketing for our backers.
That's wild. I hadn't heard anything about that. That's a fun time for everyone, I'm sure.
Yeah,
hooray!
And as I like really love the trifold pamphlet, so it was a big disappointment. We were going to do 3 of them. We ended up kind of warping that into one of our stretch goals, which is I think as of this recording has fully been unlocked. We're doing a little bonus scene called Case File, so the original pamphlets we were going to do are going to end up in that. So it's still coming.
we had a nice fun chat about manufacturing, and I've said this before on the podcast. If I had my way, I would ask every single annoying little minutia question about the process that no one wants to answer and no one wants to hear. Do you know what I mean? That's not interesting. Yeah. That's not interesting for anybody. I do love hearing all of the choices and work and effort that goes into creating these products. I think it adds so much to the process to know. One of the few times I don't have like a TTRPG book over here at my desk, I think it adds so much to know like the amount of effort and work and thought and planning that goes into the creation of the physical object of the book as much as the creation of the text. Like I think it makes that book mean so much more. They're like, no, this is exactly how they meant for it to look. They picked this binding, they picked this layout, they picked this cover, they picked the, you get the nice little sewn in bookmarks, like, oh, somebody picked that and they picked the color and they made it match. Like, this is a good book. But talking about manufacturing, let's talk about the game. Sure. So Liminal Horror is an interesting thing to me in the way that Mothership is kind of an interesting thing to me. It mechanizes horror in a way that I think for years and years and years in the TTRPG space, people were like, well, you can't mechanize horror, right? Like, oh, man, horror is a feeling, it's a thing. It's, you can't have mechanics and all of this.
Thoughts and feelings on that.
Listen, that's what we're here for. And so I think the first thing I want to approach in digging into mechanics, you set up at the top, Liminal Horror is a survival horror TTRPG, right? And so there's a lot of things that come with survival horror. The biggest of which being inventory management, which we'll get to. I love the way Liminal Horror does it. But with big air quotes, sanity effects, right? The sort of black mark bad time with a lot of TTRPGs when they try to do horror things. You mentioned the Fallout system. Like, let's talk to me about the Fallout system. Talk to me about the way that works in Liminal Horror, because it doesn't feel gross in the way that some horror games end up feeling a little gross.
Yeah. So let's do the roundabout. First, the discourse. Games don't create horror.
Yeah. Yes. Very good. Important start.
Yeah. So I do think that this is kind of important. Less of my personal opinions and more of like the importance about how this kind of leads into the Fallout itself. Your game system will not create horror at your table. That's not what the purpose of the game. The game systems, the mechanics of the game, they're really good at creating tension. Tension is one part of horror. Where there's the mechanics itself. Let's talk about Dread. Dread is the Jenga Tower horror game, if you're unfamiliar, where the idea is that the tower is this tangible representation of the fragility of your character. Fucking great imagery. Is Jenga scary? No. Jenga is, a tension building aspect of the game where the pulling the block from the tower isn't scary. It is the context in which that is framed that brings that tension, that brings that horror, where the mechanic is helping you build this mood, but the mechanic itself isn't the thing that builds the mood. So the most important thing about horror is really a horror game needs to tell you it's a horror game, because the players and the GM have to be committed to running a horror game. Like, if you are, as a player, are not bought into this idea, rolling a dice isn't going to be scary. Pulling that block isn't going to be scary. So you have that aspect of tension that helps. And then you need the player buy-in. So those two things combined together with your spooky spoken prose gives you your trifecta that creates horror. So when we design horror as game designers or whatever, again, we're not really trying to design to create horror. We're trying to give you the tools to create horror. And I think that distinction is meaningful. If that makes sense. Is that clear?
Yeah, no, I got you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that a lot of people, I think a lot of people tend to miss, is they see these horror systems and they think that the system is the secret to creating a horror. And a good, well-designed system is very important, but you do not need a great system to run horror in some degree. You can run horror with, like 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. It's the joke that D&D can do everything. The thing is like, it's the buy-in aspect that's the problem when it comes to D&D. Where your characters feel powerful. So how do you use that to tangibly create horror? Because you're trying to dealing with that juxtaposition of the unknown, the fragility of a character with a character who is like inherently strong and supposed to, survive and win the day. That's kind of where D&D fails to be horror. Is the intricacies of the system tend to make the buy-in aspect more difficult for the player. So you want something that's going to at least facilitate the buy-in and not get in the way. But you don't need the system for the horror. Again, you can tell spooky ghost stories to your friends. Create a collective narrative, do a LARP. All of these things that aren't just like mechanics for horror. That feeds into the sanity aspect of it and why sanity can feel gross. It's because you are trying to mechanize something that probably shouldn't be mechanized. You know, like the descent of someone's mental health is, you know, a classic trope, but it's primarily, you know, the cosmic horror, the Lovecraftian angle. But how do you mechanize that? You know, it's you're losing points. What does that mean? My sanity points are slowly slipping away. It's like you can use that to role play, but like again, I don't know. There is a bit of a disconnect there, and that's why it always kind of throws me for a loop. I don't particularly like sanity systems in general, so that's why we don't really deal with them in liminal horror. But I think you can do sanity really well. You know, Cthulhu Dark is a game that I think does sanity really well, where they originally had it as sanity, and then it was changed to insight for the full edition, I guess, of Cthulhu Dark. But I think that game's almost 10 years old at this point.
Yeah. Actually, yeah.
Where I think that framing, just changing sanity to insight, already fixes some of the problems with it. You know, Cthulhu Dark is all about your character on their slow descent into madness. It's one of the best games that you can buy to get that experience where your character is slowly being eroded away up until the point where, you know, they lose their mind. But insight is reframing that. It's not necessarily that your mind is being torn away from you. It's that you are seeing things that you're not meant to comprehend, and you're having a hard time kind of processing that, and it kind of breaks your character. That sounds a lot the same. I'm probably not explaining that particularly great, but I think that subtle distinction really works in the favor of, you know, Cthulhu Dark here compared to like sanity mechanics.
I think it helps it I think it helps steer it away from very easy to fall into problematic depictions of people with actual mental illness and like actual mental like complications, right? It says like you said, like they sound a lot alike, but whereas, you know, traditional sanity in those ways is kind of depicted as like a tearing down and loss of quote unquote traditional mental faculties.
Right.
Insight takes, you know, the Bloodborne model, which is probably where they got the idea of like your mind is still your mind and it still works the way that it works. The problem is it is starting to understand and comprehend and exist in layers and ways that the human mind was not meant to exist and comprehend. You know, it's like if all of a sudden we discovered the fifth dimension, or that you could see through time or some stuff like that. We wouldn't just be like, all right, fifth dimension, that's cool, let's keep moving. You know, you would take time to adjust. You would need time to comprehend. And in these instances, half of the problem is that you don't have the time to comprehend. There is a fifth dimension. Go, things are happening.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's I think that's the subtle distinct difference is it is about the way that your mind is building out in bad directions for your life, as opposed to some sort of erosion that, you know, leads to bad times.
Yeah. So when it comes to Liminal Horror's Fallout system, you know, this was already in place before I joined the team, but the Fallout was done as a very intentional shift away from sanity. You can still mimic that descent if you really want with Liminal Horror. The Fallout system will work for that, you know, like descent into insanity if that's what you want to do. But we kind of discourage it because we find some of the other angles a little bit more, you know, fun, at least in terms of how we like to approach games, where instead of, you know, sanity being firmly focused on the mind and mental being of your character, Fallout is leaning heavily into the body horror aspect of it, where we are giving you tangible things that show up on your character sheet, you know, mechanical changes to your character as they are, you know, changed. When you encounter the horrors, you will not come back the same. This is the liminal of liminal horror. You are playing this transitory period of time in your character's life where they go from being a normal person to experiencing this horrid thing, and then they're different afterwards. if they live to tell the tale. I guess that's probably the distinction there, because this is still a fairly deadly system, all things considered.
Death is different.
Yeah.
If you die, you're different.
Yeah. But the interesting thing is, so we've intentionally chosen, this is contemporary horror, this is modern horror. You are playing in analogs to real life. We've made fake locations like Carpenter, Oregon, and Coldwater, Washington, but they're kind of based upon real places to a certain degree. Hungry Hollow is pretty heavily based on Westport, Oregon. So you don't have necessarily like the luxury of pure fantasy where you can kind of make up everything. We're still trying to base this somewhat in reality in some regard. So one of the key aspects you can play with, again, is that body horror, where a lot of the monsters you're going to encounter were people. Zombies is the really, kind of core example there. We got a lot of like plays upon that zombie idea. You see it in a little bit in Hungry Hollow. Hungry Hollow is like cultists that kind of take over and, brainwash people, for lack of a better term. The Bureau is a little bit more of like a physical corruption taking over individuals. And then we get into the Bloom, and the Bloom is, zombies. So the core aspect of the game here is that you as characters are seeing people that have been changed by the horrors. And when you start gaining those horror or the fallout, when you start encountering these creatures, they start dealing stress to your character. You start losing your inventory slots to fallout as they begin to fill it up. Your character is becoming just a little bit more like those creatures that they're facing. So you have that very tangible reality of like, you see the zombie walking towards you. You may be 2 or 3 steps away from being that zombie as a character. So we give you the mechanical little change to your character. You're always seeing it because it's consuming parts of your character sheet that are very important to your character. And so again, this dual sense of tension where your characters are a reflection of the horrors in some regard as soon as they start taking horrors, and then you have the mechanical aspect where you're losing your inventory slots to the fallout. But again, we wanted to make it too where Fallout's a little bit alluring. It's the way we describe it is that Fallout will, under most circumstances, make you a little stronger, but also make you a little weirder. So you might have, mycelia of a fungus running through your arms like veins, but it's going to make you a little stronger, a little more capable. So maybe you want to get a little closer to the horrors next time. Maybe you want to get that Fallout, but if you push yourself too far, you're going to be dead, or you're going to be one of those creatures soon.
I think that aspect is what I find like so interesting and so like I don't want to say alluring. You just said alluring, but it's a great choice of word. Is you look at the Fallout table, and you're like, oh, some of these are actually kind of interesting. Yeah. And like they're fun from a character sense, right? From a purely mechanical standpoint, it's like, ooh, being a little stronger, that's fun. That's a cool time. But then from a narrative standpoint, like you said, like, oh, you have mycelium in your veins, like, oh, that's it what I appreciate about it is it gives you a concrete thing that a concrete way that your character changes.
Right.
In the ways that some other more nebulous sanity things, you mentioned like, oh, I take sanity points. Like, okay, I have 20 and now I take 5. What does that mean? How do is it nothing until it's out? Like, that seems silly. Whereas like, the way that works in this, and the way, I always think of like stress in Blades in the Dark as like one of the sort of like big pivotal changes for that sort of system. And also the way that it works in the resistance system in like Heart and Spire, where, it is a thing that feels like an eventuality, right? It is a way in which your character, through the adventures that they're having, through the encounters and things, are slowly being eroded into a different thing. And the ways that we're going to do that is we're going to give you very concrete, specific information that will affect your character physically and, usually very visually, and then gives you something as the player to act on, to incorporate in the ways that you're interacting with the game, with the adventure, with the other characters. And I think it's just more interesting overall than like 5. I took 5.
Yeah.
Got it. I took 5 to this other hit point track. Neat.
Yeah. I will say we weren't influenced by the resistance system. Like that was something that was, on the radar, but neither of us had kind of read into that until somewhat recently. But I'm currently running a campaign of Heart and having a good old time because it's dealing with a lot of the same things. Like it has a Fallout system where, and again, it triggers in the very same manner. You have to, go and encounter these things in order to trigger your Fallout. So, I can appreciate that from its design perspective, even if it's like the convergent ideas rather than having been influential.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes people invent the thing around the same time. It's just how it works.
Yeah,
especially especially now, like we talked about. There's so many new games. There's so many new things happening all at once. That's gonna happen. You know. I spent 2 years making this game. Here it is. Oh, it's the same as that. Oh, damn.
Yeah. Like Liminal Horror itself is just a bunch of shit bolted onto a very familiar framework, but it's very clean. We think it's clean and elegant at the very least. But it's we're not going to claim that it's unique. It's just I think we did a really good job of like putting it all together.
Another thing that I love, I mentioned the inventory thing, like focusing on like a survival horror viewpoint. As a person who loves video games, is big into survival horror games. The inventory management and your control. I've always viewed the inventory management part of the survival horror games as sort of a direct representation. I don't think I'm saying anything new here. So nobody come at me and be like, "Oh, Matt, you watch like you think you're coming up with all these new ideas." No, I watch a lot of YouTube essays. I've always kind of viewed like the inventory system as like your control over your environment, right? It's like your ability as your player to interact with the environment. And does that mean you have a lot of healing items for when you inevitably run into a monster? Does that mean you have a lot of weapons for when you inevitably run into a monster? And in the way that Liminal Horror says, okay, cool. You can have, what's another one that's not the mycelium? I want to come up with another one. I want another cool, fun one. All of these, I was going to say all of these are mycelium because I'm looking at the bloom one. Dingus.
Hold on, I'll give you one. I got the bureau right here.
Creeping black mold. I just saw a music video about being possessed by black mold. And it ruled. And so it slowly spreads further and further, adds to your strength. That like having that slowly like infect your character sheet in that way of just like, okay, cool, like I'm stronger. I don't have as many options as I did before because I made this decision, or maybe I had this decision forced on me, but this is what's happening. I'm losing control over my character. I think you talked about how mechanics don't make horror, but that is such a fun tool in the box, right? That's such a fun tension thing to like just like, no, you should use a little bit more of your inventory, a little bit more of your control over like your environment now.
Yeah.
That's fun. It's good.
Yeah, and it's one of the things too where there is no mechanical character progression in Liminal Horror. You start as a normal individual, you end as mostly a normal individual, depending on your luck throughout the rest of the module. But this is sort of one of the key pillars of sort of the OSR. We don't care particularly for like labels and the umbrellas and whatnot, but it's you can't ignore that Liminal Horror has its lineage in the OSR style of game. But the idea that comes from Into the Odd, Cairn, Knave, those type of games is it's like they don't really have character classes. You as a player, your class is what you carry. The inventory system for Cairn is pulled over from Knave, and the Knave is like Knave, you play knaves. Every character is a knave, but your special type of knave gets to be defined by what you're carrying. If you have a spell book and a wand, then maybe you're a wizard, or if you have a sword and shield, then you're a knight. But you can kind of switch those out and be able to be versatile. You're not bound by the class, even if you don't necessarily have like the special abilities or whatnot. But one of the most important aspects of it is that because you don't have that class to worry about, you don't have that tangible mechanical character progression that you're looking forward to, you're not gaining XP to get your next ability or whatever, your character sheet is a reflection of the diegetic means of which your character existed and has exerted themselves upon the world, where you might have the shotgun that you found in the farmer's barn as you were running away from the zombie horde or whatever. And that shotgun's an important part of your inventory because it represents, safety and defense, but it's also like, that's part of your story. You found and you've been utilizing it as a tool. And the Fallout, again, is another, kind of example of this, where Fallout is the only way you can change your stats. But it means, one, that you have encountered the horrors, because you can't get Fallout without encountering them. And two, it represents what is happening to your character. Like, they are different because of this experience. So you're seeing your character sheet change and morph over the course of play. And that's the things that you are doing. And it's representative of what your character has accomplished or failed at, so to speak, compared to number go up, new ability.
I will say for anyone who's listening to this who might be like who might be turned off by the idea that there's no mechanical advancement, as someone who came to TTRPGs primarily through Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder and those sort of D20 role systems, this is the thing. It has taken me time to adjust to understand, to comprehend, to sort of like let go of the idea that playing a TTRPG means at some point, in some way, number go up. No, in some way, even if you, even if you don't play D&D or that sort of game, you're like, okay, I play Forged in the Dark games. I play I play Apocalypse World. I played, Blades in the Dark. I play Masks. Your character's still in way, number go up. You still get XP, you do a thing, you get a new ability. That's fun. Woo. It has taken me a good little while to sort of understand that, not like as a mechanical sense, sure, I get it, but the way to envision the way that those games run, and the ways that the games flow and the arc that your character takes. So if someone is sitting there and is like, this game sounds really cool, but it doesn't fit the way that I think about games. Like, I'm thinking about games this way, and I don't see how you play a game like that and it feels interesting.
Sure.
My first thing to you is, in a non-rude way, buddy, your number doesn't go up. So, let's start there. But like, I think it's such an interesting difference to that lineage of games. Like, it's very funny to like it on the big TTRPG tree to see this big, this big branch come off of D&D style games in the OSR, and then see this other branch, come off of that. That's like, no, we're not interested in these parts of it. It's like, we're taking these kind of specific ideals, we're taking these specific like tenets, and we're going this way with it. So if someone feels excited about liminal horror but doesn't feel like they gel with it, what I would say, pick up the rules, get some friends together, and just try it out. And a lot of things like this are learned by doing. Right. You can sit there and read it till you're blue in the face. I don't think you're reading right if that happens. But the quickest way to get it is get some friends, get around the table, play it, watch an actual play. I'm going to link to the actual play that Josh talked about in the show notes. See some play at the table, and that'll probably help. Because I know for me, like, even with everybody telling me, oh, these games are so cool, this is so great, I'm just sitting there like, but when do you get a magic sword? Like,
well, you get a magic sword when you quest for it.
Right. And that was a big part of it, was that it's like, it's not part of the expectation in this style of game that you will find a magic sword. That's not just like, yeah, we're going to play the game and at some point you'll find the magic sword. You have to go like, I want to get a magic sword. And that will be the thing. That could be your character's whole arc.
Right.
Is like, that's the whole story of my character, is getting the magic sword and all of the trials and tribulations I have to go through with it. And it felt like it didn't feel like a breakthrough moment. And so again, if somebody's listening to this and it's like it doesn't feel, it just felt normal because it's not special. It's how a lot of stories are. So many stories aren't. And then Arthur could cast fireball slightly better. It was rad.
When you break it down, again, I don't want to like disparage anybody for playing a number go up type of system. It's not for me, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not pleasant. Like, I understand the desire for power fantasy. It makes you feel good. You again, it's a very easy way to understand that your character is getting more powerful in a mechanical sense when it's right in front of you, compared to the power of like a narrative sense that won't be necessarily as obvious because it's not something that's represented on your character sheet. It's something that's represented in the world and how it responds to your character. So you've got this, you've got the story structure of the power fantasy, the motto myth, the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell's Hero with 1,000 Faces, where by nature of the story itself, your character is getting more and more powerful. Luke Skywalker. Farm boy meets a wise old wizard, suddenly learns he can use magic, gets a magic sword. And again, through the course of those movies, he's learning to become more powerful because he's accessed this, the Force. But then a lot of the time when you're trying to emulate fantasy games, people want the Lord of the Rings experience. To not get into the Lord of the Rings itself, but we can look at the Hobbit. Bilbo Baggins, mechanically, the same person that he was when he left Bag End. From the start of that story, there and back again. If we talk about like his stats or his innate magic abilities or anything like that, he's a thief or a rogue, whatever you want to call it. There is not a point in time where Bilbo Baggins' number goes up beyond. Maybe you can say that the walk conditioned him or something like that. So we got a little stronger or something like that, but that's not important to the story. The important moments to the story in The Hobbit are all things that happen diegetically, narratively. You get the scene with the trolls where, the trickery around it and eventually getting them to, stay out long enough where the sun kills them. But that moment leads to finding that stash of weapons where Bilbo gets Sting for the first time. And then you're in the Goblin Caves when they're trying to cross the mountains there, and where Bilbo eventually finds the ring. Where, again, these are not things that are happening on his character sheet. They are things that are happening in the narrative, that Bilbo is being resourceful with the tools at his disposal in order to kind of benefit from it. So he gets Sting. Sting lets him get a little bit more knowledge because it glows blue and he can stab things. He eventually finds the ring. The ring allows him to go invisible. But these are quest things. These are narrative things. And then that kind of all leads up to Bilbo as a person changing to be braver, to be more risking, more daring, to go out on a limb and risk his body to help his fellow dwarves, which he became, friends with over the course of this journey. Again, this epic fantasy story, the zero to hero, but none of it is innate powers that are being kind of enabled simply by the course of the journey. It's Bilbo had that potential in him the whole time, and he's getting better by finding things, by questing for it. So his entire journey is represented by these moments rather than number go up.
And and that sort of progression, that external progression, I guess is a short way to call it, is a perfect sort of mirroring of survival horror tropes in media, but mainly video games, of like, you start the game and you've got like a stick and you're like, oh, I got a stick. All right, we're dealing with this. And then, oh, maybe you get a gun and you're like, whoa, this is great. And then, you solve the cool puzzle where you put the coins in the machines and you twist the things and you do the little secret quest and, oh, you get a shotgun. Step back, and none of those things, like you said, your character didn't inherently get stronger.
Right.
You just have different and better tools to interact with your environment.
Yeah. So, Alan Wake, James Sunderland, Leon Kennedy, all these type of folk and those classic sort of video game setups there. You're right. They're who they are at the start of the game to the end. It's the things that they uncover and the trials that put them through that change them. It's not that they're getting more buff, over the course of the game. It's again, they find those tools and they can leverage them and learn to leverage their environment. And then you as a player are getting better at playing the game the further you go on. And that's a kind of a key part of it. Or again, your character isn't changing, but you are understanding how to better leverage the tools at your disposal. So it's like the Silent Hill 2 remake is a good example here, where you can unload your gun into the enemies, the basic enemies, the little street jackets and the mannequin things. But you could also aim for the leg. You shoot them once in the leg, they stumble, then you take your pipe out and you go beat them up. The game isn't stopping you from doing that at any point in time, but that is you as a player learning to better leverage the tools at your disposal to be more effective at combat. It's not that James is getting better at this. It's that you are being better as a player. I think that's a good way to kind of think about it here, where a lot of the survival horror stuff, especially games, especially like Liminal Horror, it has a degree of player skill compared to character skill, where the mantra of the OSR is always like the answer is not in your character sheet. So you as a player have to be active and engage in this. You can't just say I roll charisma or whatever.
It's a bit of a weird tangent, but I had that thought of just like, I think this is, I like these styles of games might be like a little impenetrable to some people just because they haven't figured out how to align with where the game wants to go.
Sure.
So yeah, weird tangent, but
yeah, I completely agree. It's not easy. That's part of what we're doing with the deluxe edition is to give you the tools to kind of get into it, where, it is hard to make yourself vulnerable, and role playing is all about making yourself vulnerable. You have to be willing to open up. You have to be willing to commit to it and to buy in. And that isn't easy. That's why I think that a lot of power fantasy stuff becomes kind of second nature, where you don't have to have that same degree. You can have a great time pushing buttons on your character sheet, as opposed to having to like be a little bit more open and a little bit more engaged. And again, not to say that any is better or worse. It's just a different mindset.
Yeah. It takes a different viewpoint.
Culture of play.
Okay. We're coming up near the end of our time, but I gotta make time in the way that I do to gush about the work. I was reading the Bureau yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
The Bureau is so good. The Bureau is so good.
I really, really love what we did with that. I'll make this short. So the Bureau was the first thing I worked on for Liminal Horror. I brought the idea to Goblin Archives after I had written a little bit of a demo that ended up becoming the first floor. We were firing on all fucking cylinders when it came to that, because we rewrote, it was edited, art was done, and layout was done in 3 months for the combined length of the entire project.
3 months seems incredibly fast.
I don't know how we did it. It took a year to get the bloom out, the thing that follows it up. It's like, and we're sitting 2 years on with the deluxe edition. It's like, I still do not know how we managed to get the Bureau pulled together so quick, but we did it. And it's one of our more popular modules. It's unfortunately out of print at the moment, but we're working on that.
I was flipping through it. I was reading the PDF. And so it describes itself as a dungeon crawl at the start, and I think that's exactly the perfect way to describe it, because I was looking through the map and I was like, look at this just dense map full of points and paths and connections, and then I'm going through, and each floor has its own separate map with more detail and more description and more, and I've never seen a material like an adventure, anything so dense as a positive aspect, just so packed full of interesting, the whole thing is interesting, but interesting encounters, interesting places, interesting descriptions. The last monster, I won't spoil it in case people want to check it out themselves. The spread is fantastic. Like, it's such a fun break in the like layout, editing, formatting. It just it pops in just a way that was so enjoyable to, like, even on a PDF. Like, I was reading the spreads and I'm just like, oh yeah, look at whoa, you know, like, it jumped out.
Yeah.
That hit, that was cool. Yeah, the Bureau is rad. I'm just gonna take this moment of the podcast to say the Bureau is rad. Buy Liminal Horror, and if you don't buy Liminal Horror, buy the Bureau and just read that. Use that.
Yeah, we actually did the Bureau to the point where you don't necessarily need to even have Liminal Horror to do it. We put a little like condensed version of the rules and stuff. So the Bureau was a little intentionally designed to be self-contained if needed. But yeah, so we with our first 3 modules, it was kind of a very intentional split between them, where the mall is a faction game. You know, you're set within a mall. Maybe you can consider that a bit of a dungeon crawl, but the whole point of that experience is you're facing off with all the different factions and figuring out who to trust. The Bureau is a dungeon crawl. You know, we wanted to do a quote unquote mega dungeon in 40 pages. I don't know. People have opinions on whether or not something like this would be a mega dungeon, but it's fun to say. And then when we get into the Bloom was like, we need a sandbox. So our first 3 modules, you know, faction, dungeon, sandbox. But again, these are sort of very intentional choices that we're kind of making to give the full spread of different play styles you can have with it. But the thing is, like, you look at, you know, Control was a big influence on the Bureau itself, or Resident Evil or Silent Hill or what have you. And those are all dungeon crawls when you think about it. You know, you don't necessarily think of a dungeon as being a mansion, but in terms of like dungeon as place adventure is, yeah, I mean, a lot of classic, you know, survival horror and horror experiences are dungeon crawls.
Especially in the way that, like, if you strip away the fact that you run into goblins and have to cast fireballs at them, like, it's exactly the same thing where you're like, okay, we're going to chart each room, and then, okay, this door's locked, so let's see if we can come around to it. And oh, I found the lever that lets us activate the you know, we can put the trap floor back, so now we can get over there. Like, it's a lot of the same language. And I think, and that's fun. I think it's fun to use language in that way where you're like, yeah, it's a mega dungeon. Like, yeah, it's a great way to think of it, because it's a term that a lot of people doing TTRPGs will be familiar with. And when you apply it to this, I feel like it makes sense, but in a way that's slightly twisted, in a way that to me makes sense for a horror game. where it's like nah, it's a mega dungeon, but you know, and it makes, you know, it's like Ben Starr when he's dressed up as the Velatro guy, where you're like, I know what that is, but also that's weird. Yeah, I just had to scream about how good the Bureau was. I just gotta take a second in every podcast to just yell about how good the thing is. We are constantly living in the shadow of having to try and be as good as that. So it's a blessing and a curse. I love that. I do love and hate that idea of like we have to be as good as the best thing we ever made. That's hell.
I do think the Bloom is probably a little better in my mind. I don't know. It's hard to kind of like rank your babies, but we got an Emmy nomination for the Bloom, so we can at least say that somebody else thinks it's good.
There you go. Another. I want to take another opportunity to shout about a really cool thing. Is the oh god, what's the name? You're gonna get to it before I did. The Liminal Horror Triangle Agency crossover module.
One Night at the Shelterwood Inn.
That's it. I was like, it's One Night at. I got nothing.
It's me naming things like Fall Out Boy songs.
I love that module is my white whale game, because what I want to do is I want to run a double table. I want to run one table where they're playing Liminal Horror and the people stuck inside, and I want to run another table where they're playing Triangle Agency and they're trying to get them out. And they're like, this is I wish I had an actual play show, because this would be a really fun actual play. You should have 3 players on either side. and they're both moving through the inn and interacting with each other and doing stuff, and that'd be a fun time for everybody, I think.
The original intention was just you could run this with both systems, and it's going to be a fundamentally different experience no matter which one you chose. But also the ideal was like you pick one to start, and then you run a second session where you invert it and use whatever happened as like inspiration for dealing with it. Like I think it's better if you probably start like the liminal horror side, and then when you switch to triangle agency, you have the players dealing with the consequences of what they did themselves the session before.
It's a really cool idea, because I like adventures that like or I like when games interact with each other. I like the idea that like games understand they don't exist in a space that only includes them, like in a way that like we do. Like I understand that multiple people are making different games, and so I always appreciate it when games have some connection to each other, or when they say a thing that I love that designers do. I love when they list like, hey, here's other games to check out, or here's stuff that we like. That's fun. But I really love the idea of this is why I had Nathan and Epi on not that long ago. I love the idea of an adventure being written that's like, if you want to do it like this, if you want it, you can run it like this, you can run it like this, you can run it in this adventure, you run it in this system for this sort of adventure. As a person who's not someone who designs games, I feel very excited about the idea of more adventures being written for more audiences, in the way of like, if you like this system, if you like this system, if you like this, like, it's a fun idea. It's probably a ton of work.
Yeah, we've been intentionally kind of fostering that, where one of the things that we say, in the deluxe edition itself, and as like community managers, I guess if you want to call it that, is like there's a lot of stuff out there that works for liminal horror that you might not think. One Night at the Shelterwood Inn is an old Warhammer adventure that we rewrote to be modern, and it's like it's different, but you can see the pieces if you know it. It's Night of Blood by Jim Bambra was the original adventure, but it's like if you've run Night of Blood and then you pick up One Night at the Shelterwood Inn, you're gonna see it. Like, but it's just like we took the core idea and rewrote it all, so it's not like we're not trying to steal. We're trying to use as inspiration, and we very much like call out, and that's like this isn't hidden. So you take that core idea, and it works for modern horror, and you're just like, okay, instead of an inn at the side of the road, it's an old roadside motel next to a gas station, But that core still really works. So we wanted to make sure that we're applying that like actively to our system. Where if you own the Bureau and the Bloom, we have conversion notes just written in the back of the modules. The Bureau is, I forgot what we did at this point, but where did I put it? Oh yeah, so we have Agents of the Odd, the Company, and Mothership just tossed in the back of there, because we thought, hey, these are going to be good systems to run this, and not everybody's going to want to run liminal horror for it. Where we had someone on our server giving us a play-by-play of their campaign when they took the module and added it to their Mothership game. So it was just like some building on an asteroid in space or something like that, where everything was basically exactly the same, but they were using it with Mothership. They're running it that way, and just like the framing itself made the experience really unique. And it was a cool thing to get to read through. But even in the Bloom, we've got, I think we talked a little bit about Cairn, where we're just like, you can run this in Cairn with no changes except for making it fantasy if you want to do it. But then we have Monster of the Week is another fun one, because we think that the framing would work there. But we've also got notes on how to do Cthulhu Dark and Triangle Agency in the back here, where it's like, it's not hard. You take this thing that we really love, and it's like you don't have to have this prescribed experience. You can apply this to multiple different things. We want people to play this stuff. We don't really want it to be like so restrictive that they must play it with liminal horror,
Yeah,
and so that idea kind of spun into the Triangle Agency crossover when we were talking with those folk.
It was such a fun idea. Like when they came out, they did all these crossover things, but I really dig the sort of, I'm gonna say remix culture, and it feels weird because it feels like I'm like a 2000s tech executive, like on stage somewhere. But this idea that like nothing created for TTRPGs is off limits regardless of what you want to do. You know, the idea of just like, oh yeah, you can read this whole adventure for whatever, and if you put it in the elbow grease, you can use it for whatever system you want. And this kind of ethos of use what you got, pull out what doesn't work, use what works, you know, move it forward, shift some stuff around. I feel like it I don't know. I like the idea that like people don't have to act as like, you know, there's no new idea under the sun, right? Where it's like, oh, I have to come up with this adventure whole cloth. It's like, no, grab some old adventure that like, if you want to have like some weird adventure that has a bear, find some weird old D&D, AD&D adventure that has a bear. Use it. Add some horror elements.
Yeah.
Put a
rip,
weird cult in
steel
there.
Tear.
Yeah.
My favorite thing is to take the old West End game Star Wars RPG, you know, from the 90s, and take those adventures and run them for Orbital Blues. It's like you take out the alien, and a lot of the stories are, you know, applicable. That you can kind of bring it forward. It's my little secret weapon because none of my players have ever read that system. So I got a decade worth of stuff I can pull from, but I'm not going to feel confined to only run stuff written for Orbital Blues. You know.
Yeah, I think the thing that like I'm settling into, and the sort of ethos that I'm settling on is just like read everything. Read everything. Like all the games are good. Everybody out there is like making a cool game. It's got cool stuff. Read it, appreciate it, and you know, enjoy it for what it is. But then also, if you want to do something else with it, you can do something else with it. There's no rules. You know, there's nothing set in stone. No one's going to come to your house and yell at you. If you want to, play the Bloom in Warhammer 3rd Edition, if you can figure it out, have a good time.
Yeah, it'll probably work.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm being reactionary to a thing that doesn't exist. Maybe I'm being reactionary to myself. Maybe I'm realizing I'm breaking some wall within myself that felt that there was this restriction, and maybe that's what it is. I don't know. Maybe this is a journey. Maybe this podcast is a journey of self-discovery. Who knows?
Sure. Yeah.
But all right. Before we go, I try not to take the whole 2 hours, and then I somehow always take the whole 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it goes. Liminal Horror has a lot of what I wrote down as optional rules in the actual PDF. They're the appendices. What was sort of the thinking behind having? I mean, I don't even know if do you consider them optional rules? Yeah. I guess is the first question.
Yeah.
It's a great answer. Honestly, that's a great answer.
Again, we as writers, especially for the Deluxe Edition, because we carry this idea through, we're giving you toolkits. We're not telling you need to play a game a certain way. That's why, like, we write modules. We don't write adventures. You know, for the way that the distinction is that the modules are toolkits that you will then bring to the table and have your game. So we're not so worried about making sure that somebody's playing Liminal Horror the right way. We're going to provide some guidance because as much as I hate to admit it, there is a wrong way to play the game. But as long as things are working for your group and your table, great. So the core rules are the core rules. They're simple, they're light, they're framework. People can get those. People can have a great experience using just that. But there are people who want a little bit more. So, you know, the initial appendices that we have in the Investigators Edition is just that little bit more to help you get, like, tailor the experience to your table. And then we've carried that through into the Deluxe Edition itself, where we've got, you know, a whole expanded series of appendices there where it's like we introduced tactical combat rules to give you just a little bit more robust of experience in the Deluxe Edition there. And there's things that people haven't seen yet, but we were talking a little bit about them. And we did a double down into survival horror and talk about stuff like crafting and ammo management and stuff that's not present in the base system. We introduced funnel rules in, they've already existed, but we rewrote them for the Deluxe Edition. And there's a couple of other random things that we have in there that I'm forgetting right now. But the idea being that, like, Liminal Horror is a minimal framework that you can adapt to run, we're saying, any type of modern horror that you want. You can do that on your own. You can bolt other stuff with the system on here. More power to you. Great. But we also want to give you those options where it's like, hey, here are things that we recommend bolting on if you want to focus on XYZ. You don't need them for every game. Maybe you want the survival horror rules that we wrote for like 3 sessions where your characters are lost in the woods. You might not need them for the rest of it. So take it, put it on there, use it for those 3 sessions, throw it out, whatever. The game is yours. We don't want to, like I said, we don't want to tell you how to play your game, but we want to give you the toolkit that you can use to get the experience that you prefer at the table. So we got appendices, we got expansions, we got all this stuff. Do what you will with it.
We just made it. You do whatever you want with it. We wrote it. There you go. Have at it. You answered a lot of the things I was going to ask, so that's great. We got ahead of it. It's it's the fun thing that happens sometimes where like I ask a leading question, and then in the course of answering that leading question, you answer the follow-up question. It's like, well, there we go. There we go. This is great. So the last question, as always, before we do outros and things like that, is the 3 question. Everybody gets a 3 question. In the first episode, I asked Star who her top 3 guests to have on her show would be. It was kind of spur of the moment. Thought it'd be a fun way to end the episode, and so we've just done it every time. I come up with a top 3 question over the course of the episode, and that's just how we end the podcast, as something weird that I decided, because that's how the show works, man. I come up with a weird thing, and that's what we do. Josh, what are your 3 favorite items that are definitely only items used to solve a puzzle?
3 favorite items that are only used to solve a puzzle?
Yeah. So like, you know how in you'll play Resident Evil or Silent Hill or something, and you pick something up and you're like, well, this is definitely, like, my favorite thing is the knife that you get in Silent Hill 2 that you cannot use as a knife. It's only explicitly used to solve a puzzle.
Yeah. Let's see. So the items I can only use to solve a puzzle. You know, the fun thing about like tabletop RPGs, when you're thinking about it, is like you're not bound by that restriction. If you pick up that knife, you can use that knife as a knife.
It would be very funny as the GM to be like, no, it's not a knife. No, it's not a knife.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
But okay, so thinking of like the video game aspect of it, the radio in Silent Hill. It's not necessarily a puzzle per se, but it is the thing that, you know, for the unfamiliar, the radio plays static and it lets you know when monsters are near. But if we are thinking of it like in a tabletop sense, that would be pretty useful for tuning in to see if you can pick up radio frequencies, for one. Then you could take that and put the radio on, and even if it's just playing static, use it to attract monsters to it while you run away. So you have got a lot of options there. But in the game, you do one thing that tells you where the monsters are. Let's see. Some of the other ones, I like the big wheel because I think that that's kind of funny. You know, the big wheel you have to pick up to go turn the valves.
Always. There's always one.
Yeah. Where it's a depending on the type of the game, it might be that thing that sits in your inventory and is super fucking annoying because it's like 4 slots because it's this giant wheel, and you can only use it for that one thing. So it really puts the emphasis on how you're managing your inventory there. And then the third thing, I really like the letter in Silent Hill 2. I don't think I want to describe this letter any more than that, but I think the folk who know will know, because if I tell you what the letter does, it's going to spoil like literally the entire game. But, and again, it's not like it's used to solve a mechanical puzzle. It's used for the player to, if they're paying attention, it solves like a narrative puzzle. Where it helps you figure out what the fuck is going on in that game, or at least it gives you some indication about what's actually happening there. But yeah, so radio, big wheel, letter to James.
These are good. You did the thing that everybody does, and I love every time that it happens, where it's like, okay, I see what you're asking me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you this. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to give you this answer over here, and it's like, great, perfect. That's what I want every time. My like writer, my similarity to the letter to James for your last one is the doll in Silent Hill 4.
Silent Hill 4 is one I haven't played yet. It's sitting on my list. It is a pain in the ass to get to, so it's. I finally got a PC that can run games, so it's like I have 6,000 of them to catch up on.
GOG just released a new PC version of Silent Hill 4 as part of their games preservation project.
Yeah, it is downloaded and waiting for me to have literally any second to play games in the last ever. So
I get, well, I can't say I feel that because I literally stream video games as a living, but I understand that the feeling of having a lack of time for activities. I get you.
Yeah, I go from day job immediately into night job, and then I'm at my night the writing aspect of my life until like dinner time at around 7, and then another hour after that, and then I basically fall asleep trying to read a book in bed.
Listen. This is why you got to buy the books, right? You have to show Josh and other creators monetarily you appreciate that they're not spending their time playing Silent Hill 4 like they could be. They're making games for you.
I did my taxes a couple weeks ago and saw what I made last year, and let me tell you, it is not minimum wage.
Oh no, don't do that math. Don't do.
No, it was bad. It was bad. I owed a lot of money too, so that was annoying. But
I did not have to file taxes this year, and that should tell you. Nice. That should tell you a lot. This is only the second year of my life I haven't had to file taxes.
Yeah, I don't know. I went from being, real big video game player. I still play a lot of video games, don't get me wrong, to then like revolving my life around creative pursuits. And so it's just like the one thing I want to do, I literally cannot because I have wrapped myself up in too many projects. And we're getting through it. Once the deluxe edition is finished, I'll have a second to breathe, but then other things are coming, so we'll see.
Right, I'll have 1 second, and then you'll have some other thing you're doing.
Yeah.
Bless y'all for staying so busy. Like I said, people appreciate it with money. With money, don't just be like, "Yay, money! Buy the things."
Yeah, we're on Backer Kit now. I don't know if I said that, but Liminal Horror Deluxe Edition. We're actually doing pretty good. We've blown through some of our stretch goals. We're looking good. We got, as of this recording, like 25 days or something left. But there will be a pre-order store, and if you're listening to this years in the future, go to Space Penguin. They probably still have the book in stock.
If you're listening to this years in the future, email me and just tell me that, because that would be weird. That would be a weird email to get, and I want that to happen to future me. But yeah, obviously, I'm sure it got mentioned. I'll mention it here just so it's said. Liminal Horror Deluxe Edition on Backer Kit. The link to that will be in the show notes. Click that. Go there. The goblinarchives.ish.io will be in the description. You can go check out the Investigators version and all of the adventures that we've been talking about. Go buy them. Read them. They're great. I talked about how great the Bureau was. Here on the outro, Josh, I'll give you another who you are, where you want people to go, and the homework, which is a new thing that we're doing, just something you want to direct people to, somewhere you want to be like, hey, you like my stuff, go check out this related thing.
So let's start with me, because you can cut me off at the other part when I start rambling. So again, my name is Josh Domanski. I'm an everything in the indie tabletop RPG scene, but primarily a writer and designer. If you want dev editing, come contact me. I like doing it. It's fun. But you can find me online, primarily go to the Liminal Horror Discord server. That's where you can find me basically 24/7. If you do not already know how to access it, go to the Liminal Horror website. It's liminalhorrorrpg.com, and that's your big directory to get you to everything there. That'll get you again to the itch.io page, the Discord server. Our Backer Kit is probably linked on that, even though I'm not 100% because I don't run the page. But go to the website. Yeah. But if you want to find me specifically, I'm pretty much just on Blue Sky at this point, at least in a way that's accessible for my work. That is Unenthuser, Blue Sky, or whatever the fuck that stuff is. But it's unenthusiastic user smashed into one, Unenthuser. That's how you find me. Oh, you can also find me on itch.io at unenthuser.itch.io. Where I do some of my personal stuff there, just a bunch of like little short adventures and stuff that you can find. But yeah, come chat. Again, the Liminal Horror Discord server is a big one. We got just shy of 700 people on that server right now, so we're moving and shaking. We're doing good
That's a lot
things.
of people.
Yeah. It's classic Discord where there's like a dozen people that are actually actively talking on it, and then the rest are just like there. We are currently running a game jam that lasts until the end of the Backer Kit campaign. It's called the Horrors of the Americas Jam, where we want folk to make like little bite-sized pieces of horror that we can spread out over a map of the Americas, and then we're going to bind that together in a community book and do print on demand for it. So if that sounds interesting and the bite of sound that I've just given you there, come to the Discord server and you can find a lot more about it and get help and stuff. We're going to try and shift into a push for that in the coming weeks to get some folks to put more entries in.
That sounds cool. I love that sort of like community sourced zine thing like that. I love that.
Yeah, we've had some really, really cool stuff come in so far. We're hoping for a lot more though, so come join us. So for homework, stuff to check out. Look at my list.
So
I'm going to rapid fire.
I'm concerned.
I'm going to rapid fire a few of these things because I'm trying not to eat up a million years of time. A lot of these things. So if you want to understand liminal horror, we can talk about our media recommendations. So I want to talk a few media recommendations for homework, and then there's some games I want to shout out to, but I'll spend more time on the games. So media recommendations. The perfect 3 examples of liminal horror at the table for a movie: In the Mouth of Madness by John Carpenter. Evil Dead Rise, specifically. The other Evil Dead's very good. Evil Dead Rise traps you in a single location and has like an active doom clock that you can feel ticking in the background. Go watch that movie. It's actually pretty good. And then Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. Fucking love this movie. It is, it's all about a shift tone. You take the goofy antics of Scooby-Doo, you tweak it to horror, and that's terrifying, the whole events of that movie. But again, you can feel an active doom clock working in the background of that movie as things kind of move and shake across the experience there. But yeah, Scooby-Doo and Zombie Island, one of my favorite movies. If you want books, go read Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. That is, 4 scientists, effectively people in different trades, are sent into this area, acts this weird place that's kind of liminal and strange and warping and alien, and they get fucked up by it. Good book. Pretty good movie, too. I like both. The book is probably a little bit more divisive than the movie. The movie is definitely certainly more consumable. Uzumaki by Junji Ito. It's a manga series. Junji Ito is really well known in the horror scene there. Uzumaki is probably his best book. Again, very, very much the vibes we want to go for. You got people that are tangibly changing due to the weird shit that's happening in their environment, and then you're kind of trapped in this town that bad stuff is happening in. The last book here I want to recommend is Parasite Eve by I'm going to butcher this, but I think it's Hideki Sena. My mouth does not do well with Japanese names. So I apologize for that. But Parasite Eve is the original novel that was written in the 90s that kicks off the spur of Japanese horror, coming into the popular conscious there. You don't get The Ring without Parasite Eve. Parasite Eve also inspires the video game of the same name, Parasite Eve. That's technically a sequel to the novel. That is part of the golden age of survival horror video games. So Parasite Eve, it does a really good job of dealing with something that feels real and then spinning that to the supernatural to be horror, because it's written by a doctor. And be prepared though, if you're going to get a lot of medical stuff if you go read Parasite Eve. But I like it. It's like Michael Crichton, but not an American writing it. All right. Let me talk about TV shows real quick, and then we're going to talk about game systems. TV shows. X-Files. I don't have to say anymore. We'll watch that. Supernatural. Probably don't have to say anymore either. 15 seasons, I think, of Supernatural. A pretty good representation of what a Liminal Horror campaign would be like. Just a bunch of connected sort of horror things. And then the number one show that we recommend for Liminal Horror is Midnight Mass from Mike Flanagan. It's on Netflix. Midnight Mass, again, each episode feels like the doom clock ticking in the background. You have a secluded location, you have a modern horror, you have normal people that are responding to the horror and how it all kind of gets twisted up. It plays with a trope that I really, really like that I'm not going to spoil here because you should go watch this as blind as you possibly can. The whole Midnight Mass. Go watch that if you haven't. To shout out other people, other game systems. If you want experiences like Liminal Horror, but maybe you don't want to play this game all the time. I certainly don't, and I'm one of the writers for it. I run a lot of different systems here. And so it's fun to get a different and varied experience. It helps you become better game masters and better players to do a lot, especially if you're reading more, you're playing more, you're getting different experiences here. We talked about this one a lot, so I'm going to kind of keep it short, but Cthulhu Dark, was it Graham Walmsley? I think it's how you say his last name. I love everything about this book. Great system, great advice. The adventures are a little weird in terms of what I like to read and run themselves, but I think they're worth reading at a very minimum there. I don't think you can get hardcovers anymore. I got mine, I don't even know if it was secondhand, but I got through a really random shop a couple of years back. But you can still find the PDF. I know you can find the PDF alongside Stealing Cthulhu was a book that was a precursor to this. Stealing Cthulhu is also worth reading. It includes one of the original versions of Cthulhu Dark as well. But Stealing Cthulhu is all about taking Lovecraft stories and stealing their bits for tabletop games. That there. One of the other games I want to shout out. Recent guest of yours, I believe, Nathan Paletta.
Yes.
Imp the Perverse. I didn't get a chance to listen to that full episode yet. I just saw that it came up and I peeped on the first few minutes there. So I don't know if you got into this book, but Imp the Perverse is all about playing like the stories of Edgar Allan Poe, or at least games inspired heavily by the work of Edgar Allan Poe, where this, like, if you're a Liminal Horror fan, or you think you're going to be a Liminal Horror fan, go get this like immediately. The system is all about how you as a character have this like internal corruption that is going to manifest itself as a monstrous entity. And so you are battling this thing inside you, this Imp of the Perverse. And you're also fighting against those who have fallen to that sort of side of, their fate. They're bound up in their own personal horrors. So you have to both fight these creatures and combat the thing inside yourself that wants to change you into a monster. Very much playing in the same space as Liminal Horror, just a different spin. It's American Gothic instead of contemporary survival horror. Cool book, interesting size. I like the binding. It's really well done. But real quick, because I know we're blowing over time, the final system I do want to talk about, Public Access by Jason Cordova and Gauntlet Publishing. They don't have a physical copy of that yet because they're still making it, I guess, where this is actually a good example of kind of what we talked about earlier, where the Gauntlet, as a publishing house, they release digital versions of their games, and then over time, with the help of their community, work on the games and then come back with a better version. They did that with Brindlewood Bay. They did it with The Between. That's The Between's getting printed right now, last I remember. They did it with the Silt Verses. That's going to get a new, like, bound hardcover version sometime in the future, and they're doing it with Public Access, where Public Access, you play as 20-somethings in the year 2004 investigating the disappearance of a public access television show in Dagoya County, New Mexico.
So specific.
The thing is, like, that's the basic framework for basically a wide assortment of mysteries, where you're in this town and you're trying to find out what's happened to this television station, but over the course of that, you find yourself dealing with a monster at the lake. There are ghosts in this one house that you have to go investigate. There is the aftermath of a slumber party summoning incident that you need to deal with, and just like all this stuff there. It's got that 2000s era nostalgia for it. It's got that good like liminal horror in the sense that you're playing characters at a transitional time in their lives, dealing with the horrors. and it's a car from Brindlewood Systems, so no one knows what the answers are until you play to find out. I ran an 18 session campaign of that. I think it was like a year and a half ago. Legitimately one of the greatest experiences of gaming that I've ever done. I highly, highly recommend it, especially like there's not a ton out there for contemporary horror in terms of tabletop RPGs. But Public Access is one that you want to go read and you want to try and play.
That sounds great. I feel like I've heard the name Public Access, but I hadn't really like heard the hook, and that's sold. I'm down.
All right, but that's it. That's my big expansive list.
No, that was great. That's fantastic. Listen, that's a lot of homework. I hope everybody gets to it. Chop chop. But yeah, that's gonna be us. Josh, thank you so much for spending time. I hope everybody who's listening goes and backs Liminal Horror and gives y'all a bunch of money for all the work and makes all this tariff nonsense worth it, is what I say. It's my show. I'm gonna use it's my show. I'm gonna use this platform to yell at everybody to give people who are on the show a bunch of money. So at the very least, if you come on the show, I'll yell at people to give you money. So hey, that's a benefit. But yeah, Josh, thank you so much. Go ahead and say bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Everybody, that's another episode done, and we're here in the outro where I tell you about a bunch of stuff. I first of all want to thank Josh so much for sitting down and chatting with me. It's, again, always thankful to people for taking the time to talk to you and me, effectively, us, about the amazing stuff that he's working on. I put links in the show notes to a lot of the stuff that he mentioned, a lot of the other stuff that he has from other publishers, the APs and stuff like that. Please go check it out. I'm really excited to watch him go run the bureau for Gehenna Gaming. I've been meaning to sit down and watch Gehenna Gaming anyway for a little bit. It's just making time to do things, and time is not a thing I have a lot of. The links to everything, obviously, including the backer kit, is in the show notes. As I pull up the backer kit page, there's 6 days left as you're hearing this. Looking at the backer kit page right now, they have crossed $100,000 recently, which is very big because that means for one $20 pledge, you get PDF copies of everything. The Liminal Horror Deluxe Edition rule set, the Bloom, the Mall, the Bureau, One Night at Shelterwood Inn, and the Parson and Jesus of Hungry Hollow. I am hoping before the end of the campaign, they cross the Bureau Remastered PDF stretch goal. That would be very exciting, but we can only do that if you go and back right now. As always, thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in and checking out the new episode. I love getting the email. I've said this before. I love getting the email at the start of the week that says, here's all the downloads from the week. It's really great. If you're coming new to the show, if for some reason, this is your first one, hi, welcome. Thank you for checking it out. Please, I encourage you to go check out previous episodes. Those things might not be on BackerKit. They might not be TTRPGs at all, but I encourage you to go back, check out previous episodes. I would love to see, if I'm honest, I would love to see more people go listen to some of those older episodes. I think they're really cool. I talked to some really cool people, and I encourage you to go check them all out. If you're interested, the link to the Patreon is in the show notes. It would be fantastic. You'd help me pay for fees and hosting, but just checking this out, telling your friends, rating it, is more than enough for me. As I always say, I've got more episodes to edit, so I'll see you in the next one.